What's up everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Marvel Legends 6-inch retro-carded Scorpion action figure. Before we get into this review, I just want to say please like, share, comment, subscribe, or even hit that super thanks button. I appreciate all engagement on my channel. Now I really love how this Scorpion figure looks on the retro card. As we've already seen before, the retro card is really nostalgic, with the very eye-catching Spider-Man logo at the top. There's some Scorpion artwork on the left side, and I just really like how the color scheme, with the bright and deep shades of green on the action figure, really popping against the purples and pinks and blues of the retro card. The one thing that still disappoints me though is that the figure doesn't come with any accessories. He really could do with some alternate hands so that he could have a full set of fists or open, relaxed hands. This figure would have also benefited from an alternate head sculpt, maybe one that's screaming with a more aggressive expression. Considering the increased price point of this figure, first impressions are that he's got a more improved paint scheme, but we'll have a closer look at the figure later on to see if that makes a difference. On the back of the card, we still have the Spider-Man retro logo, the same artwork of the Scorpion over here, and usually there's a schematic over here to show you how to use accessories with the figure. But this time, it's just some pointless line work, and looking really redundant on this card. Down to the middle of the card, we have a brief description of Scorpion, and finally some product information at the bottom of the card. So now let's go ahead and get this figure open. To unbox the figure, I simply slice the plastic bubble off the retro card back, and since he comes with no accessories, I'm gonna just jump right into his Sculpt and Paint. Now as far as I can tell, this figure is exactly the same sculpt and engineering as the Molten Man Build-A-Figure Wave Scorpion. So you can see that he's got exactly the same parts and sculpt for his tail, even down to his head sculpt, and you will also still see the pins visible at his elbows and knee joints. However, despite being exactly the same figure, I do like this color scheme much better because the bright green just really screams poison and toxicity, and the darker green really adds some contrast to his outfit, as opposed to the duller single shade of metallic green on the Molten Man Build-A-Figure Wave Scorpion. And of course, not to mention that this color scheme is also very evocative of the way he looked in the animated series. I also like how with this brighter shade of green, the sculpted lines all over his body actually do stand out much better. I was initially thinking of going through those lines with a Gundam panel marker. However, I do like how the light sort of bounces off, so you can clearly see the line work in his outfit as well as his tail, definitely reminding you of how a Scorpion's body is also biologically segmented. Zooming into his head sculpt, and I really like how the dot matrix printing really enhances the way his features look. The sneer is sinister on his face, and the sharp paint applications for his eyes, as well as his teeth and mouth really bring all of that together. The flesh tone paint applied around his eyes and his mouth area does appear to be quite thickly applied, but I suppose that's necessary, especially on the dark green plastic that the head is cast out of. The dark green hits of paint on his mask really highlight the expression around his eyes, as well as bring forth his strong chin. Coupled with a light green hit of paint from his forehead all the way to the back of his head, these three shades of green really make the head sculpt work, looking quite like his animated model, and makes that head sculpt really interesting to look at. I also like how his mask is also kind of sculpted really tightly to his head, and you can see how the ears are pressed to the sides of his head. The light green paint is a stripe that goes all the way to the back of his head. And when you have a look at the back of the figure, once again all those different shades of green can even enhance how the back of the figure looks. As I mentioned earlier, his tail is just like his body, with the lines sculpted in to look like segments. The tail is cast in a light green flexible plastic with a deep green paint for the part that attaches to his back. Just going down and having a look at the entire tail, it's a flexible plastic that is posable with a metal wire inside. And here we come to the tip of the tail, where I think a new sculpt would have been necessary. So in his animation model, the end of the tail was shaped like a hose that sprayed toxic chemicals at Spider-Man. So the tail definitely would have benefited from a more show-accurate sculpt. But right now, this one doesn't look too bad for his own sculpt, because once again, there's paint work, deep green for the end, as well as a silver for the blade. And now we come round to the front of the figure again, The paintwork for the deep green around his neck is also nicely and sharply applied. I like how it's kind of got some sharp ends coming down the front, looking like fangs, to really match how the blade and the sting of his tail goes after his enemies. The rest of his torso and his upper arms are cast in a bright green plastic. Once again, we also see some hits of green around his waist for those pointy designed elements. The paintwork on his mid-elbow joint is also quite nice, because that mid-elbow joint is cast in a bright green plastic with a deep green hit of paint that matches up with the deep green tone of the gloves on his forearm. And that hit of paint is quite resistant to friction, because as you bend his elbow, you don't see any of that paint scratching off. His forearms and his hands are cast in that medium green plastic with light green paint at the top of the forearm that matches the bright green shade of the rest of the figure quite well. Now we look at his crotch piece. That's a mid-green tone plastic. His legs above his boot are the bright green plastic. And once again, a hit of paint over here just above his boot for the pointy design element, tying in really nicely with a pointy pattern on his gloves as well. And of course, the rest of his boots and feet are in that mid-tone green. So despite not having an awful lot of paint on the rest of his body, I do think the subtle hits of paint here and there are quite well applied and really add to the design of his entire outfit, and definitely looking way more eye-catching than the rather dull, all-metallic green of the Scorpion from the Molten Man Build-A-Figure wave. So now just having a quick side-by-side with the only other Scorpion action figure that I have in my collection from the Toybiz Spider-Man Legends series. I do like his bigger size because he's more intimidating looking. Plus he also actually has clawed hands and articulation in those hands as well as his toes. However, I do like the cleaner animated look on the new figure. He definitely also looks more proportional, and that head sculpt is really quite fantastic, especially in this animated series color scheme. Articulation wise, his head is on a ball hinge, so that means you got to spin his head 360, not an awful lot of sideways tilt, able to look down quite well as up. Swivel hinge at his shoulders for 360 spin, and it feels detented while also going out quite a good bit above 90 degrees. Swivel at the bicep for 360 spin, double jointed elbows that have the pins still visible, and that's quite distracting. Swivel hinge at the wrist for 360 spin as well, and going in and out. Mid-torso ball joint, so that gets you some sideways tilting, but that's not much swivel because of how the tail attaches and hinders that swivel in that ball joint. But the ball joint does afford quite a decent amount of forward bend swivel at the waist for 360 spin. Quite stiff ball joints at his hips, but they do go out. You can also articulate them front and back. Thigh swivel that's really well disguised by all that lines in his outfit, and that spins 360. Double jointed knees that give you quite a decent amount of range. Boot swivel for 360 spin, and finally ankle tilt for a good range upwards and downwards, and ankle pivot upwards and inwards. And finally, not forgetting the tail, of course, that is flexible and bendable for you to pose as you like. However, because of its length, it's more likely that you have to pose the figure so that he's supported by his tail. But I stand corrected. It's possible to stand him up quite well as long as you pose the tail forward and bringing the center of gravity of the figure forward and balancing with the weight on the back. I did not have the Molten Man Build-A-Figure Wave Scorpion. I did not have the Molten Man Build-A-Figure Wave Scorpion because of his dull metallic green colors. So this is me having this figure in hand for the first time. And I must say I'm quite impressed with the posability, especially in the mid-torso ball joint. And coupling that with the long and awesome bendy scorpion tail, this figure is really fun to handle, and I really love his animated series color scheme. But despite really liking this figure's posability as well as his color scheme, I can't help that this figure could have definitely benefited from some interchangeable hands to look more natural in certain poses, and also to have a newly sculpted end of the tail with a hose that's more accurate to his animation series appearance. And I was thinking of other figures with more expressive hands for some hand swapping. However, the only figure that I could think of with green hands are the Vault Guardsmen, and the shade of metallic green on those Vault Guardsmen hands do not match up with the figure well at all. Scorpion stands at just under 6¼ inches, and that's just under 16 centimeters. When fully straightened out, his tail is about 15¾ of an inch from the top of his backpack all the way to the tip of the sting, and that's about 40 centimeters. And this to me is the most impressive part of the figure. For size comparisons, Scorpion is just a smidge taller than Shocker and naturally smaller than Rhino and Kingpin. And here he is alongside Vulture, Lizard, and Venom. And here he is also with the retro-carded cel-shaded Venom, Spidey, and the Renew Your Vows Spidey. To compare him with other lines, here he is with some G.I. Joe Classified series, some Star Wars Black series, and just cause my channel is Scorpio after my horoscope star sign, here is Marvel Legends Scorpion with Storm Collectibles MK Scorpion. What stands out for me is Scorpion's super cool and eye-catching animated series color scheme. However, I do feel he's missing an accurate stinger tail, alternate clawed hands, and perhaps an alternate head with fangs and reptilian eyes just like his first animated appearance. I'm torn about this one. It looks good and poses well, but it really could have been next level stuff with those mentioned improvements. If you're a Spider-Man animated series fan, then this is probably for you. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, subscribe to my channel, or even hit that super thanks button. Thanks for watching, take care, and stay safe.